If you build it, he will come. If you've ever read the novel Shoeless Joe or seen the film Field of Dreams, this is all you need to know in terms of why. These 7 words. If you build it, he will come. Why did Ray Kinsella decide to plow under his corn and build a baseball field? Because he will come. It seems pretty clear, at least by the end, and any itch about why is satisfactorily scratched. But real life does not always wrap things up in a neat little bow. In a 1976 Sports Illustrated article, when asked why, 6 years earlier, he decided to rebuild a sizable portion of the Cincinnati Reds' Crosley Field on his farm in northern Kentucky, Larry Luebbers replied, quote, "I don't really know. I guess I just wanted to." End quote. The 30-year-old farmer and real estate agent ripped out rows of seats. He hauled dugouts and lockers, fences and scoreboards, gift shops and concession stands, transporting the objects in a beat-up station wagon or pickup truck. And his reason for doing this? I don't really know. I guess I just wanted to. Later in the article, when asked to expand on his reasoning, Luebbers added, quote, "I got started and just couldn't get stopped," end quote. Which is equally unsatisfying. One of the most pressing questions in the history of humanity is, why do we, humans, do the things we do? We want to know why people act and behave the way they do, so that maybe we can learn something about ourselves, so that maybe we can change our lives for the better, or avoid costly mistakes, or so that we can simply sleep more comfortably, unraveling a few more of the millions upon millions of mysteries that exist at any given moment. I previously discussed Larry Luebbers in the final episode of Season 2, but there was a lot left unsaid. Tonight, I'm going to try to fill in some of those remaining holes and figure out, deep down, why Larry Luebbers rebuilt a Major League ballpark in his backyard, and what we can take away from a seemingly ordinary man who accomplished an extraordinary, outlandish, and downright bizarre feat. Tonight, Larry Luebbers and his Field of Dreams. You're listening to the Midnight Library of Baseball, where there's no loud music, no jarring sounds, only nostalgic, thought-provoking, emotional stories about baseball. I'm Ben Orlando. In his Sports Illustrated article from 1976, journalist Roy Bongartz described in detail what ended up on Larry Luebbers' farm from Crosley Field. Quote, "There's the ticket office with the sign, box seats $3. There's the bat rack from which Johnny Bench and Pete Rose chose their weapons. There's the billboard with a 30-foot-long Pepsi Cola bottle on it, and another vast ad reading Weideman Beer. There is also the dugout from which manager Bill McKechnie directed the Reds to the World Championship in 1940. And there's the hole Bertie Tebbetts poked in the dugout wall to blow smoke through it in order to beat the no-smoking rule. There's the original 60-foot flagpole, and just outside the gate, a souvenir stand advertising autographed balls for $3. End quote. And Larry Luebbers did not simply haul and reassemble the components of Crosley Field. He spent $8,500 to bulldoze his land and reshape it to match the contours of Crosley Field, including the unique left field embankment, which was a grassy hill that sloped from 0 degrees to 20 degrees, reaching a height of 4 feet by the time it reached the left field wall, and causing visiting outfielders to sometimes stumble and fall while backtracking for a fly ball. According to Roy Bongartz, Larry Luebbers spent in total more than $35,000 to rebuild Crosley Field on his farm. And this is 1970, 55 years ago. $35,000 then is equivalent to $300,000 today. Larry Luebbers spent $300,000 because, quote, "I don't really know. I guess I just wanted to." One reason Luebbers did what he did might have come from a place of defiance. He did not like people telling him what he could and could not do, and there's a fantastic story linked to this point. Now, I know I told it in season 2, but it's so good, I'm going to tell it again. In 1961, Larry Luebbers was a young man studying at a seminary to be a priest. And at the time, he was watching the last game of the World Series between the Reds and the Yankees. And for baseball, 1961 was a huge year, with Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris squaring off for the home run title, and Maris eventually breaking Babe Ruth's single-season home run record. And here's a young Larry Luebbers loving baseball and the Reds, and he's mesmerized and then jumping out of his shoes as Reds outfielder Wally Post smacks a home run. He was probably watching the game on a small, grainy black and white screen, but that didn't matter. His Reds hadn't won the pennant in 21 years, and here they were right in the mix, vying to become world champions. And right when Wally Post smacks that home run, a priest walks up and clicks off the TV. And this little action would have been even more dramatic then, because today you have the remote control and you press a button and the screen silently goes dark. But in 1961, you'd have one of those big, clunky dials that would make a loud clicking sound when you turned off the set. So the priest steps in, clicks off the game, and tells Luebbers to return to his studies. And Luebbers' response? Quote, "Right away I thought, is this my life or not? And I walked out of there and never went back." End quote. Whether or not someone initially told Luebbers not to rebuild Crosley Field on his farm, he would have had those voices in his head, and he might have done what he did as a way to rebel. And in fact, once he got going, he met severe resistance from the mortgage holders of his farm. But somehow Luebbers managed to pay them off, which shut them up. And he wasn't delusional. Luebbers said at one point, quote, "You know, I wonder how it would be selling this house and land with a Major League Baseball field on it. If I ever wanted to sell, well, maybe some people wouldn't appreciate having Crosley Field. Old people, maybe." End quote. I like that last part. Old people, maybe. According to Luebbers' son, Larry Jr., his father wasn't crazy about anything except baseball. And there, clearly, he'd gone bonkers. But to fully understand not only the pull of baseball, but the pull of the Cincinnati Reds on Larry Luebbers, we have to understand what the Cincinnati Reds and Crosley Field meant to baseball in America. When Larry Luebbers decided to repossess large sections of Crosley Field, he was preserving a monument that had existed for 60 years and an organization that had existed for more than 100. Thousands of ball games and historic moments had taken place on this field and had taken place in the components. I'm sure most Reds fans, including Larry Luebbers, would have known that the Reds were credited as the very first professional baseball team in 1869. It would have been a point of pride for Reds fans. And while Crosley Field was not the very first ballpark, its origins went all the way back to 1912. It would be called Redlands Field until it was purchased in 1934 by a radio manufacturer named Howell Crosley Jr. But 1919 saw the Reds in their first World Series and winning their very first World Series against Guess who? The Chicago White Sox. Crosley Field and the Cincinnati Reds were part of the biggest scandal in baseball. Crosley Field also was home to the first night game, with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt flipping the switch from the White House. Crosley Field was also known for flooding. According to an in-depth article on the history of Crosley Field, quote, over the ballpark's first 30 years, the field became a lake 16 times. The worst and most celebrated of the floods came in 1937, when the water level rose 21 feet above the playing surface, almost inundating the entire lower level of seats. End quote. And you can actually look up pictures that show men rowing boats across the field. Even this flooding could have been a factor that bonded fans like Larry Luebbers to the Reds in Crosley Field. And there's another strange feature of Crosley Field that would have bonded fans to the players. The team, clubhouse, and locker room were not connected to the field by tunnels or hallways. So players had to walk out into the stands through the fans to get to the dugout and field. How strange is that? It's one of those what were the designers thinking moments. But this strange feature would have created an intimate experience for players and fans. And again, something to be proud of. Look, we actually mingle with our players every game. And this would have been something that Larry Luebbers experienced during his trips to the field. There's another factor here that might explain Larry Luebbers' motivation to preserve Crosley Field. It has to do with what came after. When Luebbers went to grab a few seats from Crosley Field before they tore it all down, he would have been aware of Riverfront Stadium, which began construction in 1968. Luebbers was living through the era of the cookie-cutter stadium movement, which meant the end of unique, idiosyncratic stadiums like Crosley Field. Riverfront Stadium, and 10 others like it around the same time, were also known as concrete donuts. Not very appealing. These stadiums were circular-shaped or ovular. They had artificial turf. They were used for multiple sports, and they completely lacked charm and character. We started this episode with the question of why. Why did Larry Luebbers do what he did? Why did he go to all the trouble and expense to move a Major League ballpark to his backyard? But here, with these concrete donuts, there's another giant why, which ties into the why of Larry Luebbers. Why did stadiums across the country suddenly devolve into these artificial, concrete monstrosities that sucked the life out of the baseball experience? Well, the answer is complicated and fascinating. One of the main reasons Cincinnati ended up with the concrete donut of Riverfront Stadium can be traced back to the 1950s. Before the 1950s, all Major League stadiums were privately funded. It wasn't until 1953 in Milwaukee that the first publicly funded stadium was built. And since the public was footing the bill, owners had to make concessions. For example, if taxes were going to pay for a stadium, that stadium needed to be multi-purpose, leading to repetitive, symmetrical models that could house baseball games, football games, soccer games, concerts, you name it. Also, because of public funding, they wanted to find a way to decrease maintenance costs. So the grass of Crosley Field, so soft and forgiving, was changed at Riverfront Stadium to AstroTurf, a great example of an invention that seemed like a wonderful idea at the time. From an article describing the consequences of artificial turf on players, quote, their knees took a pounding from a hard surface, slightly softer than asphalt. Their legs, elbows, and arms endured carpet burns from sliding catches, and they had way too much time to think just how in the world they were going to throw out a runner while awaiting a 100-foot hop hit off the bouncy turf. At its height in the mid-1970s, artificial turf covered 4 of every 10 facilities used by major league teams. End quote. Another reason for the concrete donuts was the brutalist architecture movement. Larry Luebbers may not have been aware of the specific name, but he would have seen the architecture popping up across the country. Ballparks were no longer complements to a city. They were now concrete structures removed from the city and surrounded by more concrete and asphalt parking lots, so people could escape the city instead of really be a part of it. And game after game, this takes a toll on fans. I remember going to several games at Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia, and the fields, that concrete, that hard, sterile, blinding AstroTurf, it's so fake, and I can still feel that fakeness. And for players, it was also a mind-numbing experience. From former Pirates ball player Richie Hepner, quote, "I stand at the plate and I honestly don't know whether I'm in Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, St. Louis, or Philly." End quote. So was Larry Luebbers aware of all of these factors? Maybe not, or at least not consciously. But whether he knew or not, when he rebuilt Crosley Field on his farm, he was preserving character and individuality that flew in the face of these cookie-cutter ballparks. Which fits well with a guy like Larry Luebbers, because it's a 1 in a million guy who decides to rebuild a major league ballpark in his backyard. If you'd like to support Midnight Library of Baseball and help it reach more listeners, please donate at midnightlibraryofbaseball.com. You can also leave a review at iTunes or wherever you listen. Thank you. Now, back to the show. When we try to get inside the head of Larry Luebbers to figure out why he did what he did, maybe the clearest and simplest answer comes from his son, Larry Luebbers Jr., who said this years later while giving a talk. Quote, "I talked to my dad on the way over here, and he goes, every kid should have a baseball field in their backyard. He's out in the middle of the country, and he wants to put a baseball field in his backyard so that my brother, myself, and my 4 sisters had a place to play baseball growing up." End quote. For Larry Luebbers Jr. and for his brothers and sisters, and for the children of the area, the Luebbers farm was an amusement park. It was a fairy tale land. Larry Luebbers assembled Little League teams, paying for the uniforms and equipment himself. And the farmhouse was basically a bed and breakfast. Again, from Larry Luebbers Jr., quote, "We'd have tournaments. We'd have kids and teams from different states, Indiana, Ohio, all over the place, coming to play a weekend series. And the parents would hang out after a Little League game. We'd have 15 people for breakfast. All the parents just stayed, so all the kids just crashed where they fell. And we had a big house, and if you found a couch, you were lucky. The only thing that you had to pay for is that every kid on the team had to go pick up 100 rocks on the infield before we could play. So that was the rule. So we'd have, 20 guys out there, kids and parents, picking up these pebbles and throwing them over the side." End quote. And behind all the excitement and all the chaos was Larry Luebbers, who no doubt was tapping into his own inner child. After all, he was a lifelong Reds fan. He also played semi-professional baseball with dreams of going to the big leagues. One night, he and Larry Jr. went out to his new baseball field, and with his son pitching, Larry Luebbers smacked the first home run out of the new Crosley Field. And how great is that for a former semi-professional player? to walk out onto a major league field and smack a home run. Maybe that in itself was worth the trouble. And remember, people had to go out of their way to reach the field. It was in the middle of farmland. But people did. As Larry Luebbers Jr. described it, people would come from all around. They'd hear about the field. They'd drive up. They'd walk to the front of the farmhouse and knock on the door. And they'd ask, "Do you mind if we walk around the field? Do you mind if we wander over to the baseline seats and just sit for a while?" Does this story sound familiar? Most of the visitors were ordinary folk, but also there were people like Johnny Bench and Pete Rose, Tom Hume and Don Gullett, former or current major league players who also wanted to see what the heck was happening on a small farm in Union, Kentucky. This was the environment in which Larry Luebbers Jr. grew up. And knowing he'd go on to become a major league pitcher, you might think, of course it makes sense. He learned through osmosis, through getting the best advice and coaching from all of these great players who'd visit the field. Well, yes and no. As Larry Luebbers Jr. explained years later at a Cincinnati Storytellers event, his path to the majors was far from straightforward. Larry Luebbers Jr. was actually cut from his 8th grade team. They told him he was too small and just not very good. He was able to play high school because he had a graduating class of 52 kids. But when he went to the University of Kentucky, he had no intention of playing baseball. His fastball was in the 70s, nowhere close to fast enough. But his freshman roommate wanted to go to open tryouts, so Larry Luebbers Jr. joined his friend. As he tells it, he tried out with cheap cleats and a softball glove borrowed from his sister. But each day of his tryouts, his fastball got faster. It started in the 80s and moved up, 85, 86, 87. His roommate didn't make the cut, but Larry Luebbers Jr. did. And by the time he was a college sophomore, this guy who was once too small was now 6 feet 6 inches tall and could throw a fastball well over 90 miles per hour. Luebbers Jr. couldn't explain his progression. He did believe sound mechanics helped him improve and kept him off the disabled list. And where did he get these sound mechanics? From former major league pitchers like Tom Hume and Don Gullett, who visited Crosley Field and helped out this little kid. All that knowledge, all the proper techniques and inside information was all there just waiting for his body to catch up. And when Larry Luebbers Jr. was eventually drafted to the majors, of all the teams, he was drafted by the Cincinnati Reds. Larry Luebbers Jr. ended up playing 3 seasons in the majors, 36 games in total, which is more than most ball players get to experience. You could say his father made an investment that eventually paid off, but Larry Luebbers Sr. wasn't thinking that far ahead. One day he got it into his mind to salvage some seats from Crosley Field before they tore it down. And once he started, he couldn't stop. In the end, he created a haven, an oasis for children and parents, a kind of baseball commune where people got to live out their dreams, as long as they agreed to pick up 100 rocks and throw them out of the field. The dream of Crosley Field on the Luebbers farm lasted a decade, until the farm and everything on it were acquired in 1981, at which point the components were sold off or discarded. Except this is not the end of the story, because some of those components were integrated into the Blue Ash Sports Complex in Ohio in the late 1980s, where the entire Crosley Field was recreated. And it's still there today. When someone does something so unexpected, so grandiose, so insane, it's fun to try to figure out why. But when it comes down to it, we only really have to look at the results. Larry Luebbers' focused insanity led to a magical experience for hundreds, if not thousands of children and adults, memories that would fuel and comfort them in the darkest of times. If you show up and you fail, well, at least you know you tried. And who knows, you might end up achieving the craziest, most ridiculous dream imaginable. We'll end tonight with another baseball listener story. This one comes from Jason in Washington, D.C.
I kind of hate parents at youth sports games. You know, they have this feeling like their kid needs to win in order for them to feel better about their lives. And what they should be doing is smiling, which none of them are, and keeping quiet, which they rarely are, and cheering when appropriate. Before the game, they should say, "I love you, have fun." Afterwards, they should say, "I love watching you play. Let's get ice cream," especially after a loss. Mike Birbiglia has this joke. You know, my dad always said he just wanted me to play, didn't care if we won or not, but we never got ice cream after a loss, which I think is, you know, funny because it's probably true. You know, I played the game growing up along with a lot of other sports. When my sons were young, I've got these 3 kids, and when the boys were little, I bought a wiffle ball and a wiffle ball bat, and one day we're out in the front yard, and my wife's up at bat with the wiffle ball bat, and my 3-year-old throws a strike, and she hits it, and you hear pop, pop. So the first pop is her hitting it, and the second one is her hitting my son with the ball right between the eyes. And I saw that happen, but I didn't get it on video, but I did get the aftermath of him, like, you know, pretending to be a little dazed, but he was fine, thank God. It's just a wiffle ball, he's totally okay. And so I take that wiffle ball and the wiffle ball bat and I put it in the closet, and it stays in the closet for 2 years until the pandemic hits. And on the day the pandemic hit, we also had our daughter, March 15th, 2020 is when it settled into the DC area. And I said to my wife, "I'm sorry, they tell us to stay inside. I can't do it. We've got to go outside." And so I took my 2 sons and we went outside all day, every day. And we were totally alone. We didn't even see other people. And one day I said, "Oh, right, the wiffle ball bat. Let's take this outside." And we went out and fell in love. First, you know, obviously with wiffle ball, but then with baseball. And the only store I took them to for those first few months of the pandemic was Dick's Sporting Goods, and we bought more baseball equipment than most minor league baseball teams have. And we became totally, totally obsessed. I didn't want to coach, I just wanted to be dad. But the next season at some point, the coach got the yips. And for coach pitch, the way it works is you get 5 pitches, and it doesn't matter if they're good or bad. You get 5 pitches. And he struck out 2 kids in a row without a pitch being anywhere near the strike zone. Every pitch was either in the dirt or 10 feet above their heads. So I'm only exaggerating a little. And he turns to the assistant coaches, which I wasn't one. He turns to his assistant coaches and goes, "Hey, do any of you guys want to pitch?" And they were like, "No, I don't want to go in after this." And so he turns to the parents. He goes, in desperation, "Does any of you want to pitch?" And I was like, I'll do it. What the hell? And I started pitching, and then I became an assistant coach, and then I got voluntold to be a head coach, and it actually really worked out beautifully because we're just obsessed with the game, and it's something we do together. It's like our main family activity. We like going to the Nats, we like going to the O's, but we love minor league ball and college ball. We have a blast, an absolute blast going to Blue Crabs games. You know, in right field, in foul territory, they have like a jungle gym setup, like a playground setup. It's great. In right field and home run territory in the center field, they got green space. We'll go out there and have a catch with each other, find other families to have catches with. If it's not too crowded, my sons will have catches with the right fielders on both teams in the later innings. In left center, they've got a basketball court, and in left field, they put in a swimming pool with bumper boats. And we've been there when it's empty and hot, and we'll be, doing bumper boats from like the third to the sixth inning. I mean, it's just, we love it. The two things that I love most, which are baseball and my Jewish identity, and volunteer with Israel Baseball. I co-chair the group here in the greater Washington area. We're doing a tremendous amount of things. We're raising money for Israel Baseball and for the activities we're doing locally. And there's famously, been a disconnect that's changed since October 7th and the horrendous war that Israel's found itself in with so many of its neighbors. But there's been this struggle for American Jews and Israeli Jews to come together because we're brothers, we're cousins, we love each other, but that doesn't mean we always get along. And baseball in particular, and sports in general, is the single best way for people to come together. You think about so many kids who couldn't talk to their dads about anything, but they can talk about baseball. So when American Jews and Israelis play the game, they're able to bond, they're able to cut across any of their differences, and it builds a level of love and excitement like few things can. I took my team just to one game at the last WBC to see Team Israel play Venezuela. It was an awesome atmosphere. Half the crowd were Venezuelans or Venezuelan Americans who were wearing their team's flag and cheering loudly, and they loved the game and they loved their players. Everyone's got their Salvador Perez jerseys on, and then the other half are people like me, American Jews, who love our people, love our homeland, and are rooting for our boys. So there's no animosity in the crowd. Everybody's high-fiving, everybody's smiling, and it almost doesn't matter at that point who wins or loses. One of their AA players, this guy named Jacob Steinmetz, struck out Juan Soto, who I'll be rooting on this season as a Mets fan. But to have a AA guy, young, I think he was 19 at the time, strike out Juan Soto in a big league ballpark, like how unbelievably cool is that? I want more kids of all backgrounds playing ball as long as possible. I read these stories and these statistics about kids quitting all organized sports by middle school. It just makes me cry, really. Playing the game for longer, having fun with it at any level, just get out there and enjoy the game, and then go to ball games. Every game should be packed. To me, baseball teams are a public good.
Thanks, Jason, for sharing your story. That's all for tonight. I'll see you next week for episode 8 of the Midnight Library of Baseball. The show is produced and edited by me, Ben Orlando. Music by Sergi Patkin and Ashot Danielian at Pixabay. Good night.